In the summer of 2001, three friends, Emily, Jake, and Marcus, set out on an adventurous hiking trip into the remote Cascade Mountains, eager to embrace the beauty of nature and the thrill of exploration. They were last seen setting up camp at a secluded clearing, laughter echoing through the trees as they shared stories under a canopy of stars. What happened next would haunt investigators for over 2 decades. 2 decades later, a routine trail maintenance operation led to a shocking discovery buried beneath layers of moss. A cache of their gear that would force the community to confront the haunting mystery of their disappearance and the secrets hidden within the wilderness. Subscribe for more real crime-inspired stories like this one. Twisted fates, hidden truths, and the unyielding quest for answers that refuse to fade away. In the summer of 2001, three close friends, Emily, Jake, and Marcus, set out on a hiking trip into the remote Cascade Mountains, a wilderness area known for its dense forests, rugged terrain, and unpredictable weather. The trio, all in their early 20s, had planned this trip for months, eager to escape the noise of city life and challenge themselves against the vast, untamed landscape. But the mountains were hiding deadly secrets. They were last seen setting up camp at a clearing near a seldom-used trail, their laughter echoing briefly before the vast silence of the mountains swallowed them whole. The sun had barely risen on July 12th when Emily, Jake, and Marcus departed from the trailhead, backpacks heavy with supplies, their spirits light with anticipation. Emily, the unofficial leader of the group, had carefully mapped out the route, charting a course through the backcountry that promised both adventure and solitude. Jake, ever the outdoorsman, carried the bulk of their gear, including tents and cooking equipment, while Marcus, the youngest, brought along a camera to capture the journey. They were inseparable since high school, their bond forged over shared experiences and mutual trust. None of them knew they were walking into a trap. That day, the weather was clear and warm, the sky a brilliant blue that stretched endlessly above the towering pines. The friends followed the trail deep into the wilderness, their path weaving through moss-covered rocks and babbling streams. They stopped occasionally to rest and drink from the cold mountain springs, their conversation lighthearted and filled with plans for the evenings around the campfire. But as the hours passed, the forest grew denser, the sounds of civilization fading into a distant memory. By late afternoon, the trio reached a small clearing nestled between towering firs and ancient cedars. It was the perfect spot to set up camp, secluded, with a view of the distant peaks and a gentle breeze that whispered through the trees. They pitched their tents, gathered firewood, and prepared a simple meal. What they didn't know was that someone was already watching them. The last thing anyone saw was the flicker of their campfire under a sky slowly darkening with the approach of dusk. When the friends failed to return on schedule, concern rippled through their families and the local community like wildfire. Emily's mother called the ranger station, her voice trembling with worry. Jake's father organized a search party, rallying neighbors and volunteers to comb the area. Marcus's older sister contacted the authorities, desperate for any news. The search that followed would become the largest in the region's history and the most baffling. Over the following days, search and rescue teams scoured the forests, following every lead, every faint trace that might point to the missing hikers. Helicopters hovered above the treetops, their spotlights cutting through the canopy as the ground teams fanned out in grid patterns. Despite the exhaustive efforts, no sign of Emily, Jake, or Marcus was found. Their campsite was empty, their backpacks vanished, and their last known footprints swallowed by the soft earth and undergrowth. The wilderness seemed to have swallowed them whole, leaving behind only a haunting silence where their voices once echoed. As the days turned into weeks, hope faded, replaced by a growing sense of dread. The case was declared cold, the mountains kept their secrets, and the three friends became a mystery that haunted the small towns nestled at the forest's edge. The isolation of the Cascade Mountains, combined with the dense foliage and treacherous terrain, posed immense challenges to the search teams. The area was notorious for sudden storms and rapidly changing weather conditions, which hampered visibility and made navigation perilous. Rangers noted that even experienced hikers sometimes lost their way among the labyrinth of trails and hidden ravines. Wildlife, too, was a concern. Bears, cougars, and other predators roamed freely, adding a layer of danger to the already unforgiving environment. But locals whispered of dangers far worse than wild animals. Local lore spoke of the mountains as a place where the veil between the natural and the supernatural was thin, where those who wandered too far might never return. While most dismissed such stories as folklore, they added to the unease surrounding the disappearance. The community held vigils and prayed for the friends' safe return, their absence casting a shadow over summer festivals and family gatherings. Parents warned their children to stay close to home, and hikers approached the trails with newfound caution. In the weeks following their disappearance, investigators pieced together the last known movements of the trio. Witnesses at the trailhead recalled seeing the friends eager and well-prepared, their energy infectious. A park ranger reported hearing faint voices near the clearing around dusk, but was unable to locate the source. No distress signals were received, no emergency calls made. It was as if Emily, Jake, and Marcus had simply vanished into thin air, or been erased by someone who didn't want them found. The families, grappling with the uncertainty, clung to memories of happier times, campfire stories, shared meals, plans for the future. They created photo boards, distributed flyers, and appeared on local news programs, appealing to anyone who might have seen something. Letters poured in from strangers offering condolences and tips, but none led to a breakthrough. The investigation stalled, a labyrinth of dead ends and unanswered questions. Over time, the trail grew over, the campsite reclaimed by nature, and the mountains returned to their quiet, watchful state. Yet beneath the surface, the mystery remained alive, an open wound waiting to be unearthed. The disappearance of Emily, Jake, and Marcus became woven into the fabric of the region's history, a stark reminder of nature's power and the fragility of human life within it. Detective Laura Chun, assigned to the case more than 2 decades later, would later reflect on this initial chapter with a mixture of frustration and determination. The early search efforts, while thorough for their time, were hampered by limited technology and the vastness of the terrain. Evidence was scarce, and the clues that did exist were fleeting and fragmented. The story of the 3 friends' last day was pieced together from memories and fragments, a puzzle missing too many pieces to form a clear picture. But the seeds of the mystery were planted in that summer of 2001. The laughter around the fire, the hopeful steps into the wilderness, and the sudden, inexplicable silence that followed. That silence would echo across the years, waiting for someone willing to listen and uncover the truth hidden beneath the towering trees and shadowed trails of the Cascade Mountains. 22 years later, October 2023. In the autumn of 2023, more than 2 decades after Emily, Jake, and Marcus vanished into the depths of the Cascade Mountains, a group of forestry workers made a discovery that would reignite the cold case and send ripples through the community. What they found buried beneath the forest floor would shatter everything people thought they knew about that summer. While clearing a fallen tree near an old, rarely traveled trail, the workers uncovered a buried cache hidden beneath layers of moss and decaying leaves, a collection of hiking gear and personal items that had lain undisturbed for years. The cache was carefully packed in a weathered canvas bag, stained and worn but remarkably intact given the passage of time. Inside were a pair of hiking boots, a frayed map marked with handwritten notes, a partially water-damaged journal, and several other belongings that immediately caught the attention of law enforcement. Among the items was a faded photograph of the 3 friends, smiling beneath a bright summer sky, their faces frozen in a moment long past. But it was what wasn't in the cache that sent chills down investigators' spines. News of the discovery spread quickly. Local law enforcement notified the families, and the media descended on the nearby towns, eager to cover the sudden resurgence of the decades-old mystery. The story that had once faded into the background now dominated headlines, stirring memories and raising questions that had lain dormant for years. The public was captivated by the possibility that new evidence might finally shed light on what had happened to Emily, Jake, and Marcus. Detective Laura Chun, recently assigned to the cold case unit specializing in missing persons, was tasked with leading the renewed investigation. Chun had built a reputation for her methodical approach and keen attention to detail, qualities that made her the ideal candidate to re-examine a case long thought unsolvable. Her first step was to carefully analyze the recovered items, hoping they might offer clues overlooked by the original search teams. What she found in Emily's journal would haunt her for months. The hiking boots showed signs of wear consistent with the arduous terrain of the Cascades: scuffs, mud stains, and dried pine needles embedded in the laces. The map, though faded, bore markings that suggested the friends had deviated from their planned route, possibly seeking a shortcut or an undiscovered vantage point. The journal, despite water damage, contained legible passages written in Emily's neat handwriting, offering a rare glimpse into the friends' experiences during their final days. Detective Chun pored over the journal entries late into the night. Emily's words revealed a growing sense of unease among the group, a shift from excitement to apprehension as they encountered unexpected challenges on the trail. One passage mentioned strange noises in the forest at night. Another spoke of feeling watched but seeing no one. These subtle hints suggested that something had unsettled the friends, though the exact nature of their distress remained unclear. But the later entries told a far more terrifying story. Day 3. Someone's been moving our things. Jake says I'm paranoid, but I know what I packed and where I put it. Day 4. Heard voices last night. Not hikers. These were different. Angry. Marcus got photos of footprints that aren't ours. Day 5. They're following us. We changed direction twice, but they always find us. Jake's talking about splitting up, but we won't leave each other. The investigation team coordinated with forensic experts to examine the items for any trace evidence. Soil samples clung to the boots and bag, and microscopic analysis identified unique plant matter native to a specific, less explored section of the Cascade Mountains. This finding pointed to a location that had not been thoroughly searched during the original rescue efforts, opening a new avenue for investigation. Even more disturbing, DNA testing revealed traces from at least 2 unknown individuals. At the same time, the renewed media attention brought forth a wave of tips and memories from locals who had lived in the area at the time of the disappearance. Some recalled fleeting sightings of the friends near the trailhead, while others mentioned unusual activity in the forests, unfamiliar vehicles, strange lights, and the occasional sound of voices where none should have been. Though anecdotal, these accounts added texture to the growing picture of what might have transpired. One particularly compelling lead came from a veteran forest ranger, Tom Reynolds, who had patrolled the region in 2001. Reynolds remembered the initial search vividly, recalling how the terrain's complexity had hampered efforts. More intriguingly, he spoke of an odd weather pattern that had developed shortly after the friends' disappearance. Early, thick fog that lingered unnaturally long in certain areas, coupled with faint, unexplained sounds reported by other hikers and rangers. It was like the forest was hiding something, Reynolds told investigators. And now I think I know what. Though dismissed at the time, these details took on new significance in light of the recent discoveries. Detective Chun arranged meetings with the families, updating them on the progress and carefully managing expectations. For them, the discovery was bittersweet. Hope mingled with the fear of reopening old wounds. Yet, many expressed gratitude that the case had not been forgotten, that their loved ones were still remembered and sought after. As the investigation unfolded, Chun coordinated with a team of search experts to plan a new expedition targeting the area indicated by the forensic analysis and ranger reports. The goal was to uncover any physical evidence that could explain the friends' fate, whether it be remains, shelter, or signs of struggle. Preparations were meticulous, with specialists in wilderness survival, forensic archaeology, and search and rescue gathered to maximize the chances of success. This time, they would be ready for whatever the mountains were hiding. The renewed search was a stark contrast to the initial efforts of 2001. Technological advances allowed for the use of drones equipped with thermal imaging, ground-penetrating radar, and satellite imagery to scan vast swathes of the forest rapidly. This high-tech approach aimed to overcome the limitations that had thwarted earlier investigations. Yet, despite these tools, the wilderness remained a formidable adversary, its dense canopy and rugged topography concealing secrets that refused to surface easily. Throughout the preparations, Detective Chun remained acutely aware of the emotional weight the case carried. Every piece of evidence, every lead, was not just a clue but a connection to 3 young lives abruptly interrupted. The renewed investigation was more than a professional assignment. It was a mission to bring clarity and peace to families who had endured years of uncertainty. As the team embarked on the journey into the Cascades, the air was thick with anticipation and somber reflection. The mountains, unchanged by time, stood silent and imposing, their slopes cloaked in the fiery colors of autumn. The search was not merely a physical endeavor, but a confrontation with the past, a chance to unravel the mystery that had haunted the region for over 20 years. Back in town, the media coverage intensified, with reporters chronicling every development and analyzing the recovered items with the help of experts. The public followed the story with a mixture of fascination and empathy, drawn to the enduring friendship of Emily, Jake, and Marcus and the unresolved questions surrounding their disappearance. Detective Chin's investigation had breathed new life into a case many had thought closed, and each day brought fresh insights and renewed determination. The discovery of the buried cache was more than a mere coincidence. It was a thread pulling at the fabric of a long-standing enigma, promising to unravel truths buried deep within the Cascades. Yet, even as the search team pushed forward, the forest kept its secrets tightly held. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with the challenges of nature and the shadows of history. But for Chun and all those who refused to forget, the quest for answers had truly begun. Reconstructing July 12, 2001. On the morning of July 12, 2001, Emily, Jake, and Marcus awoke with a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. Their plan was clear: to embark on a challenging hiking trip deep into the Cascade Mountains, testing their endurance and strengthening their friendship amidst the wild beauty of the Pacific Northwest. What they didn't know was that this perfect day would be their last. The day was bright and warm, the air filled with the scent of pine and the distant murmur of mountain streams. Each friend brought a unique energy to the group: Emily's cautious optimism, Jake's rugged confidence, and Marcus's youthful enthusiasm, creating a balance that had carried them through years of shared adventures. Emily, the de facto leader, had spent weeks researching the route. She had mapped out a path that would take them through lesser-known trails, avoiding the more crowded areas in favor of solitude and discovery. Her journal, meticulously kept, chronicled every detail: weather forecasts, supplies packed, and safety precautions. She was determined to make this trip memorable but safe. Her careful planning would ultimately save their lives for a few extra days. Jake, a seasoned outdoorsman, had taken charge of the heavy lifting, carrying most of the gear and ensuring their equipment was in top condition. Marcus, the youngest and most spirited, was armed with a camera, eager to capture every moment of their journey. Their last day together began with a simple breakfast cooked over a small campfire. The morning sun filtered through the canopy, casting dappled light on their campsite. They spoke of the trails ahead, sharing hopes and jokes, their voices bright against the backdrop of rustling leaves. The camaraderie was palpable, three friends bound by trust and shared history, unaware that this day would mark the beginning of a mystery that would haunt the region for decades. Marcus's camera captured these final moments of innocence. The photos would never be developed. As they set off, the forest seemed to embrace them, the path winding through towering firs and ancient cedars. The trail was rugged, strewn with rocks and tangled roots, but the friends moved with confidence, their steps sure and steady. Along the way, they stopped to admire wildflowers and listen to the songs of birds hidden in the branches above. Marcus snapped photos, capturing candid smiles and moments of quiet reflection. Despite the beauty surrounding them, subtle signs hinted at the challenges ahead. The weather shifted unexpectedly. Clouds gathered on the horizon, casting a gray pall over the forest. The air grew cooler, and a faint mist began to settle among the trees. Emily noted the change in her journal, expressing a cautious hope that the weather would hold. But weather wasn't the only thing changing in the forest that day. The group pressed forward, their spirits undampened, but an undercurrent of unease began to thread through their conversations. As afternoon approached, the friends reached the clearing where they intended to camp for the night. It was a secluded spot, far from the beaten paths, bordered by dense underbrush and overlooking a narrow valley. They set up their tents with practiced efficiency, gathering wood for a fire and preparing a modest meal. The fading light painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, the air growing still except for the occasional rustle of small animals. That evening, their laughter filled the clearing as they shared stories and plans for the coming days. Emily's journal entries from this time reveal a mixture of joy and apprehension, mentions of strange noises in the distance, shadows that seemed to move just beyond the firelight. Jake joked about the forest playing tricks on their minds, but the smile never quite reached his eyes. Marcus, always eager to lighten the mood, captured these moments on camera, unaware that these images would become haunting reminders of a vanished past. Later analysis of the campsite would reveal footprints that didn't belong to any of the three friends. The community back home watched anxiously as the hours passed without word from the trio. When the friends failed to check in as planned, their family's concern grew exponentially. Emily's mother reached out repeatedly, her calls unanswered. Jake's father coordinated with neighbors, organizing search parties that combed the surrounding areas. Marcus's sister contacted local authorities, pleading for information. The initial search efforts were swift and thorough, but the wilderness proved impenetrable. What searchers found at the campsite defied explanation. Witnesses who had seen the friends at the trailhead described them as well-prepared and in good spirits, their eagerness infectious. Rangers and hikers recalled hearing voices near the clearing the night the trio disappeared, but found no trace of their presence. The forest, dense and unforgiving, concealed all signs of their passage. Despite helicopters, tracking dogs, and ground teams, no footprints, belongings, or shelters were discovered. The families held vigils, their faith tested by the silence that stretched on. Flyers with the friends' photographs adorned community centers and storefronts. Local news stations ran stories, appealing to the public for any information. The search became a community effort, with volunteers scouring trails, riverbanks, and rocky outcrops. Yet, as days turned into weeks, hope dwindled, replaced by a gnawing dread. It's like they were just erased, Emily's mother would later say. Like they never existed at all. The wilderness of the Cascade Mountains was as beautiful as it was treacherous. Thick forests masked hidden ravines. Sudden storms could turn a gentle stream into a raging torrent. Wildlife roamed freely. Bears, cougars, and wolves moved silently through the underbrush. The terrain challenged even the most experienced outdoorsmen, and the forest's vastness made comprehensive searches nearly impossible. But investigators would later discover that nature wasn't the only predator in these woods. Local stories whispered of the mountain's mysterious nature. Some spoke of trails that seemed to shift, of voices heard without source, of a land where time and space warped unpredictably. While many dismissed these as folklore, they added a layer of unease to the disappearance. The idea that the forest might somehow claim those who ventured too far seeped into the collective consciousness. In the weeks following the disappearance, investigators pieced together fragments of the friends' last known movements. Their campsite was found abandoned, but curiously, no tents, backpacks, or gear remained. Footprints led into the forest but vanished after a short distance. No distress signals were sent. No cries for help were reported. It was as if Emily, Jake, and Marcus had been swallowed by the very earth beneath their feet. The emotional toll on the families was immense. They clung to memories of shared laughter, late-night conversations, and dreams unfulfilled. To them, the friends were not just missing. They were lost to a silence that refused to be broken. Their grief was compounded by the unknown, the absence of answers that might bring closure. The community rallied around the families, offering support and solidarity. Yet beneath the surface, a palpable sense of unease lingered. The disappearance of the three friends became a shadow that darkened the summers that followed, a reminder of the wild's unforgiving embrace. Detective Laura Chun, who would later reopen the case, would come to understand the complexities of that final day, the hopes, fears, and mysteries that surrounded the trio's last steps into the Cascade Mountains. The story of Emily, Jake, and Marcus was not just one of loss, but of friendship tested by the unknown, a bond that would inspire a search for truth that spanned generations. Their last day remains etched in time, a vivid snapshot of youth, adventure, and the fragile boundary between human courage and nature's vast, indifferent wilderness. Detective Chen's deep dive into the past. In the autumn of 2023, Detective Laura Chun sat in the dimly lit conference room at the county sheriff's office, surrounded by stacks of aging case files and faded photographs. The renewed investigation into the disappearance of Emily, Jake, and Marcus had reopened a trove of information, some forgotten, some overlooked, that would form the foundation of her inquiry. What she discovered in those dusty files would convince her that the original investigation had missed something crucial. As she sifted through reports from the original search, witness statements, and autopsy records from unrelated cases nearby, Chun realized that the decades-old investigation was riddled with gaps and inconsistencies that begged for scrutiny. The original search operation, launched within hours of the trio's disappearance in 2001, was a massive coordinated effort involving local law enforcement, volunteer searchers, and park rangers. Yet, despite the scale, the vastness of the Cascade Mountains and the limitations of early 2000s technology severely hampered the effectiveness of the efforts. Chun's review revealed a shocking oversight. Entire sections of the forest had never been searched. Chun noted that many sectors of the forest, especially the more remote and rugged areas, were left unsearched or only superficially examined, mainly due to safety concerns and resource constraints. The discovery of the buried cache in 2023, far from the initial search perimeter, underscored this lapse. Chun's review of the original reports revealed subtle contradictions in witness accounts that had been dismissed too quickly. Several hikers and locals had reported hearing strange noises near the trails during the days surrounding the disappearance, including whispered voices and unexplained rustling. But these details were dismissed or never fully pursued. One witness report made Chun's blood run cold. A local ranger's journal entry mentioned an unnatural stillness in one sector of the forest, followed by a sudden fog that lingered longer than typical for the region. At the time, these observations were cataloged but never connected to the missing hikers. One particularly striking lead came from Tom Reynolds, a veteran forest ranger who had been patrolling the Cascades in 2001 and was still on duty. He recounted a series of unusual events that had occurred during the original search that sent chills down Chun's spine. "I've never talked about this before," Reynolds confided, "but what we experienced out there wasn't natural." Reynolds described how, on the third day after the disappearance, a dense fog rolled in unexpectedly, reducing visibility to mere feet. Search parties were forced to halt as the eerie silence was broken only by faint, untraceable sounds, whispers, footsteps, and what some believed were distant cries. Reynolds admitted that at the time, these occurrences unsettled the team, but they were attributed to natural phenomena and the stress of the search. Chun also uncovered evidence that some leads had been prematurely dismissed. For example, a local hunter reported seeing a makeshift shelter near a rarely used trail, but the information was deemed irrelevant because it was outside the search zone. Similarly, a camper claimed to have encountered 3 hikers matching the description of Emily, Jake, and Marcus days after their supposed disappearance. This sighting was never fully investigated, lost in the noise of conflicting reports. These weren't coincidences, they were breadcrumbs leading to the truth. Interviews with surviving family members and friends provided additional context that painted a darker picture. Many recalled that the trio had been unusually cautious in their preparations, aware of the dangers posed by the terrain and weather. Some suggested that Emily's journal, recovered years later, hinted at an awareness of being followed or watched, though these entries were vague and open to interpretation. Friends described the group as adventurous but not reckless, which made their vanishing all the more baffling. The detective's painstaking review of old maps and satellite imagery revealed that the original search teams had focused primarily on established trails and accessible areas, inadvertently neglecting the off-trail regions where the environmental evidence from the recovered gear suggested the friends had ventured. This oversight was compounded by the challenging topography, steep slopes, thick undergrowth, and unstable ground that discouraged extensive exploration. But Chun noticed something the original investigators had missed, a pattern of illegal activity reports that coincided with the disappearance. Chun reached out to experts in wilderness survival and forensic archaeology to understand how the environment might have affected the friends and any potential evidence. Specialists explained that in such dense forests, natural processes, like erosion, animal activity, and plant growth, could quickly erase signs of human presence. Moreover, sudden weather changes could disorient even experienced hikers, leading them off course or into dangerous areas. But it was the human element that proved most disturbing. The detective also explored the possibility that human interference might have played a role. Reports of illegal activities in the region, such as poaching, drug cultivation, and unauthorized logging, surfaced during her investigation. Locals mentioned unfamiliar vehicles and strange lights in the forest during the summer of 2001, raising questions about whether the friends might have stumbled upon illicit operations. This line of inquiry introduced a new dimension to the case, suggesting that the wilderness was not the only threat lurking in the mountains. Chen's team reviewed law enforcement records from neighboring jurisdictions, searching for any incidents or arrests that could be linked to suspicious activity in the area around the time of the disappearance. While no direct connections emerged initially, the pattern of illicit use of the forest suggested a network that operated with relative impunity, complicating the search for the missing hikers. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed was terrifying. In parallel, Chen sought out surviving witnesses who might remember details overlooked in previous interviews. One such individual was a local woman who, in 2001, had been hiking near the trails and recalled seeing unfamiliar figures moving stealthily through the trees. She described their behavior as furtive, their presence unsettling. Though her account was vague, it aligned with other reports of unauthorized activity. As Chun accumulated these pieces, a picture began to form, one that involved not only the harsh realities of wilderness survival, but also the murky undercurrents of human activity hidden beneath the forest canopy. The detective sensed that the disappearance of Emily, Jake, and Marcus was not simply a matter of getting lost or succumbing to nature, but possibly entangled with darker forces. This time, they had the technology to prove it. Despite the passage of time, the case was far from cold. New leads demanded fresh attention, and the decision was made to organize a renewed search expedition targeting the overlooked areas. This time, the team would be equipped with modern technology, drones, thermal imaging, GPS mapping, to probe the forest in ways impossible 2 decades prior. The community, stirred by the discovery of the buried cache and the reopening of the case, responded with cautious optimism. Family members, though wary, expressed hope that the renewed efforts might finally provide answers. The media coverage brought renewed scrutiny, but also respect for the sensitive nature of the investigation. "We never gave up hope," Marcus's sister Sarah told reporters. "We always knew someone out there had answers." Detective Chun understood that every detail mattered: the faintest noise, the smallest footprint, the briefest glimpse of movement. The shadows of the past loomed large, but she was determined to unravel the truth. The Cascade Mountains held their secrets close, but with each new lead, the veil began to lift, revealing a story far more complex than anyone had imagined. Evidence that couldn't be ignored. The recovered hiking gear, once buried and forgotten beneath layers of moss and soil, became the focal point of the renewed investigation. Forensic analysts carefully examined each item, searching for clues that could shed light on what had transpired in the dense wilderness of the Cascade Mountains nearly 2 decades earlier. What they found would turn this missing persons case into a homicide investigation. The worn boots, frayed map, and damaged journal were subjected to a battery of tests, revealing subtle but telling signs that hinted at a story far more complex than initially believed. The boots showed an unusual pattern of wear, scuffs and scratches inconsistent with normal hiking use. Closer inspection revealed traces of abrasion that suggested the wearer had navigated not only rocky terrain, but also dense underbrush, and perhaps even struggled against obstacles. The soles bore embedded debris from a specific type of soil unique to a secluded area of the forest, one that had not been part of the original search zones. But it was what else was embedded in the boot treads that shocked investigators. This finding pointed to the friends having ventured into territory previously uncharted by rescuers. The map, marked with handwritten notes and route adjustments, indicated a deviation from the planned path. The inked annotations suggested the group had intentionally altered their course, possibly in response to unexpected conditions or in pursuit of a less traveled route. Some notes referenced landmarks that did not correspond to known trails, implying the friends were exploring unmarked areas. Most disturbing were the notations made in what appeared to be a hurried, fearful hand. "They're following, and not safe here." The map's condition, water-stained and torn, also suggested exposure to harsh elements over an extended period. Emily's journal, partially legible despite water damage, contained entries that painted a picture of escalating tension and uncertainty. Early passages were filled with excitement and detailed observations of the natural world. However, later entries grew darker. Mentions of strange noises in the night, fleeting shadows glimpsed from the corner of the eye, and a pervasive feeling of being watched. The final entries revealed a nightmare scenario that had never been considered. Day 5. "We know they're hunting us now. Found our gear moved again this morning. Jake's hurt. His leg is bad. We have to keep moving, but don't know which way is safe." One entry described a moment when the group had stumbled upon what Emily called an unnatural clearing, a spot where the forest seemed eerily silent and devoid of wildlife. These passages hinted at an experience that unsettled the trio, though the exact nature remained elusive. Laboratory tests on the gear uncovered traces of plant matter and soil rarely found near established trails. Botanists identified fragments of rare mosses and ferns, as well as pollen from flowers that only bloomed in remote, shaded pockets of the forest. The soil clinging to the boots and bag matched samples from a specific ravine known for its rugged terrain and difficult access. This area had not been thoroughly examined during the initial search, largely due to its inaccessibility and the dangers posed by steep cliffs and unstable ground. But the most shocking discovery was the foreign DNA found on multiple items, DNA that matched criminal databases. Armed with this information, Detective Laura Chun coordinated a new field expedition focused on the ravine and its surrounding areas. The team comprised search and rescue experts, forensic archaeologists, and wilderness survival specialists, all prepared to navigate the challenging landscape. What they would find in that ravine would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Equipped with GPS devices, drones, and portable scanning equipment, the group set out to locate any physical remnants that might provide answers. As the team delved deeper into the forest, the environment grew increasingly hostile. The dense canopy filtered sunlight into fragmented beams, casting shifting shadows over the uneven ground. Thick undergrowth snagged at clothing and equipment, while the constant drone of insects filled the air. The ravine itself was a maze of jagged rocks, narrow ledges, and tangled roots, demanding careful navigation and heightened vigilance. "It felt like the forest was actively trying to keep us out," one searcher later reported. Despite the difficulties, the search yielded promising signs. The team discovered faint traces of a campsite, scattered charred wood fragments, a rusted canteen, and remnants of a makeshift shelter constructed from branches and leaves. These findings corroborated the evidence from the recovered gear, suggesting that the friends had sought refuge in this remote area. But the shelter bore marks that made everyone's blood run cold. The shelter, though rudimentary, bore marks of recent disturbance, as if someone had attempted to conceal or dismantle it. Among the debris, the searchers found a weathered journal page, its ink faded but still legible. The passage, penned in Emily's handwriting, described a moment of panic when the group realized they were not alone. She wrote of hearing footsteps approaching their camp at night, the crackle of underbrush breaking the silence, and the cold realization that something, or someone, was watching them. The entry ended abruptly with the chilling words, "They're coming. If anyone finds this, tell Mom I love." The discovery of this page intensified the sense of urgency within the team. The possibility of human interference introduced new questions. Had the friends encountered others in the forest, and if so, who were they? Were these strangers hostile, or merely fellow travelers? The search widened to include areas where unauthorized activity had been reported, adding a layer of complexity to the investigation. When the DNA results came back, Detective Chen's worst fears were confirmed. Further forensic analysis of the campsite yielded traces of fibers and hair that did not match the known profiles of Emily, Jake, or Marcus. These samples were sent for DNA testing, raising the possibility that others had been present. The findings suggested a brief but significant interaction, perhaps a confrontation or an attempt to evade detection. The DNA matched two individuals with extensive criminal records involving violence and intimidation. Throughout the expedition, the team documented environmental anomalies consistent with earlier ranger reports. Areas of the forest exhibited unusual silence, with an absence of wildlife, sounds that contrasted sharply with the vibrant ecosystem surrounding them. Certain patches of ground were unnaturally barren, as if disturbed by human activity or other forces. The atmosphere was heavy, as if the forest itself resisted discovery. Every step deeper felt like we were walking into a trap, one team member confided. Detective Chun remained focused on piecing together these fragments. She recognized that the evidence painted a picture of a journey marked by increasing peril, physical challenges compounded by the looming threat of unknown observers. The friends' attempts to navigate and survive in the wilderness had led them into a domain where natural and human dangers intertwined. As the team retraced the likely path of the trio, they encountered further signs of struggle. Broken branches bent low as if by force, footprints partially obscured by moss, and scattered personal items. Each discovery was meticulously recorded, contributing to a timeline that suggested the friends had moved through the ravine over several days, their movements erratic and marked by caution. The pattern of evidence told a clear story. Emily, Jake, and Marcus had been systematically hunted. The expedition also uncovered clues hinting at the presence of illicit activities in the area, discarded equipment, makeshift traps, and signs of recent human passage inconsistent with authorized forest use. These findings aligned with reports of poaching and trespassing, reinforcing the theory that the friends' disappearance might be linked to encounters with these clandestine operators. Back at the base camp, forensic teams worked tirelessly to analyze the growing cache of evidence. The integration of environmental science, forensic anthropology, and criminal investigation was beginning to unravel the complex web surrounding the disappearance. Each clue brought the investigation closer to understanding not only what had happened to Emily, Jake, and Marcus, but also the broader context of the forest's hidden dangers. The evidence was now overwhelming. This was no accident. This was murder. Detective Chun remained resolute. The terrain was unforgiving, and the answers elusive, but the recovered gear and the signs uncovered in the ravine had transformed the case from a cold mystery into an active search for truth. The wilderness had revealed its secrets slowly, but with persistence and modern technology, the path forward was becoming clearer. The fragile threads woven through the gear, the journal, and the forest itself were beginning to form a narrative, one of friendship tested by adversity, of courage in the face of unknown threats, and of the relentless pursuit of answers buried beneath the towering trees of the Cascade Mountains.